Hello and welcome to the Civil War Project, where I'm retracing Civil War history one person, place, and event at a time. Because the build-up to the Civil War is just as important as the war itself, I've created a weekly recap series that posts every Tuesday. This is your weekly recap for Monday, February 14th through Sunday, February 20th, 1859. For previous weeks, you'll find them on my channel under the weekly recap playlist. So, let's talk history. On February 14th, Oregon officially becomes the 33rd state. It's been a long road to get to this point. Settlers started to arrive in 1843, largely from Missouri and other pro-slavery states. The provisional government banned slavery at the time, but instead passed exclusion laws. These laws forced all African American or mixed-race people to leave the territory within 3 years, or 2 years for men. Refusal to comply meant they would be restrained and, quote, whipped no more than 39 times. There were several changes made over the years, with the final exclusion law prohibiting free African Americans from being in the state, though that was limited to south of the Columbia River. As of 1850, the census showed fewer than 50 African American residents. Oregon becomes the first and only state to be permitted into the Union with exclusion laws. This week, the state of Indiana finally gets 2 certified members in the U.S. Senate. You might remember that a few weeks ago, the new Republican majority Indiana State Congress had sent 2 new Republican members to fill the Senate seats that they believed to have been filled illegally by the previous Democrat-led state Congress. After going through all of the legal arguments, U.S. Senate members vote 30-15 to keep the original 2 Democrat senators, Graham Fitch and Jesse Bright. Southerners are quite pleased with this vote because Fitch and Bright are pro-slavery, even though Indiana is a free state. These 2 men had also supported President Buchanan's effort in 1857 and 58 to make Kansas a slave state under what was called the Lecompton Constitution. The Lecompton Constitution was damaging to the whole political fabric of the country because it went against the popular sovereignty idea that was put in place by Democrat Senator from Illinois, Stephen A. Douglas, via the Kansas-Nebraska Act. That act stated that residents in a territory would vote on whether a proposed state should allow slavery or not. The Lecompton Constitution was voted on by Kansas citizens in 1857 and passed. However, it was proven that that vote had been fraudulent, and when a second vote occurred in January 1858, it was defeated. Kansas could not become a state without an approved constitution from its citizens. However, President Buchanan wanted Congress to approve Kansas's statehood anyway, along with the Lecompton Constitution, which would have brought Kansas in as a slave state and also excluded free African Americans in its Bill of Rights. Senator Douglas felt that this was the exact opposite of popular sovereignty, and the Democrat Party split over it. It was not approved in Congress, and the split in the Democrat Party remains. Vice President John C. Breckinridge, who was expecting to be the Democrat nominee for president in 1860, is still going around the South, including in his home state of Kentucky, making speeches about how fair it was for Buchanan to try and push Kansas through, but even Southerners feel it was largely a fraud. This is leading them to have great concerns that Breckinridge is too closely tied in with Buchanan, who is currently just as unpopular in the South as in the North, even though he has been a supporter of the institution of slavery. Even Breckinridge's home state of Kentucky is starting to lose faith in him. This week, President Buchanan provides a speech to Congress asking for special powers as president to employ land or naval forces in the United States when it comes to protecting American transit in Mexico and Central and South America. He states that those southern republics have been in a constant state of revolution and civil war since their independence, and the safe passage of Americans, military, and trade vessels are subject to whoever is in control. He provides examples of Great Britain and France, quote, whose executive governments have the war-making power, can employ the necessary means to enforce immediate redress for similar outrages upon their subjects. The U.S. Constitution says that only Congress has the power to declare war. The New York Times republishes an article from the St. Louis Democrat about a skirmish that occurred 3 weeks ago in Kansas with abolitionist and wanted man John Brown, 12 freedom seekers, and around a dozen men who were providing protection for all of them. A gentleman had come from Kansas and reported a rumor to the paper that he had heard as he left central Kansas. The rumor is that John Brown, who had been blockaded in some log huts near Nebraska and was released by a force of Free State citizens from Kansas, had afterwards met the Missouri posse led by Dr. Woods, deputy marshal, whom Brown captured and immediately hung. As the informant reached Missouri, he found the same rumor there, though a local hotel owner told the traveler that he had been told by a judge that Woods had not been hung, but instead was taken prisoner by Brown. The article ends by saying if it is true, which it isn't, you might remember that Woods let Brown go, and Brown and his group are now in Iowa, that fellow abolitionist John Doy and his son, who were captured with other freedom seekers 3 weeks ago, would be made to pay by the citizens of Platte City, Missouri, where they are currently in jail awaiting trial. As for the freedom seekers and 2 free African Americans that were with Doy, they have met a horrible fate. The freedom seekers were placed on a steamboat and sent to New Orleans, Louisiana, to be sold at a slave market there. As for the 2 free African Americans, they have continued to insist they are free. John Hurd, a slave catcher, was allowed to whip them most unmercifully to make them confess, but neither man breaks. Hurd handcuffs the 2 men and sends them from the Platte City Jail to Independence, Missouri, to be sold. From the Dallas Herald, a Washington correspondent from the Boston Courier has furnished an entertaining letter in which he strives to answer the question, what does it cost President Buchanan to live? He receives a $25,000 a year salary, a house, garden, and stables free of expense. The house is furnished and the garden cultivated by the government. Every article of furniture necessary is furnished by the United States. The government also lights and heats the house. It pays for a steward to take care of public property and for a fireman. The executive office is in the executive mansion, and the government provides a private secretary, clerks to the private secretary, 2 messengers, and a porter. For all domestic servants, the president must pay out of his own private pocket. He pays for all food out of his private person except for the garden vegetables. It is said the president gives dinner for 40 guests each week, so one can do the math and see if there's anything that remains of the $25,000 salary at the end of the year. The African Repository is the official publication of the American Recolonization Society, which supports the migration of free blacks going back to Africa, or specifically Liberia. The society was established by white citizens who felt that African Americans could never fully integrate into American society. The African American community overwhelmingly rejects this project, as they feel they are just as American as any other citizen, having had generations before them living in the United States. This week, a letter is published in the repository with the permission of Mary Custis Lee, Robert E. Lee's wife. Mary's father had offered freedom to the enslaved Burke family if they went to Liberia. Rosebell Burke writes Mary about how, though it was initially difficult, the family is now thriving in Liberia and have no intention to ever return. She asks Mary how she is doing, but also asks for news about her own family she left behind. Keeping correspondence with Mary is the only way to connect her to her own enslaved loved ones back home. And those are just a few of the key things that happened the week of February 14th through February 20th, 1859. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to receive notifications when future videos come out. Thank you for watching, and as always, I bid you an affectionate farewell.